Hello and happy Tannin Tuesday to all of the Tannin bays out there. My name is Ben. I'm the Chief Ecosystem Officer here at Betta Botanicals. And today we're going beneath the leaves on all of the burning questions that you've been asking me and my ambassadors throughout the last week. Normally this is a piece of content that I would be posting over on my TikTok or my Instagram, but there's just been so many questions asking the same things that I thought we'd break it down here in a short YouTube video here on Tannin Tuesday. So buckle up, grab your own mug of tannins and get ready to go beneath the leaves on Botanical, Blackwater, and Biotope aquariums. Question number one pertains one of the most popular products that I have available on bettabotanicals.com, and that is this Betta tea, which is natural Blackwater tannin replenishment that you can just pop into your aquarium, and it replaces the beneficial tannins to the water, helping you recreate the natural conditions of your fish. And the number one question that I keep getting asked is related to the storage of excess tannins, because a lot of people have smaller aquariums that are around the 5-gallon size, and one of these tea bags is going to make that water super dark. So storage of the excess tannins has been a very popular question, and there's two main ways that you can prepare the Betta tea. One of those is by placing one of these tea bags into a mug of boiling water, letting it come down to room temperature, and then dosing the aquarium with the tea you've just made. The other way you can use this product is by putting one of these tea bags directly into the aquarium and letting it steep to the color that you prefer. However, almost always you're going to have extra tannins either in the mug of hot water you prepared, or you're going to remove the tea bag from the aquarium before it's released all of the tannins that are contained in the tea bag. So how do you store the extra? Well, I always recommend storing any extra in a container with a lid that you can store in the refrigerator, and that's because tannins are naturally consumed by bacteria and fungi within the aquarium as a primary food source. They're naturally broken down by the organic organisms, even the plants that are existing inside of your aquariums. So put a lid on it, put it in the fridge. Now, I have experienced better and longer storage conditions when you use the boiling water brewing method, because you are sort of pseudo soft canning this Betta tea, creating a more sterile environment than if you were to use some cold brew methods. I'll put a link in the description because I did create a piece of content talking about this cold brew method and the potential for it to preserve more of the natural compounds like the antioxidants from the tannins in your Betta tea that you're adding to your tank. The next question that I'm asked almost every single day, whether it's in an email or an Instagram DM or comment on a video, is what do I do with the decaying leaves on the bottom of the aquarium? Do we remove those leaves once they start degrading? Do we let them fully break down on the substrate, forming a nice rich detritus layer? Or how do I know when there's become too much detritus in the aquarium? Well, the answer is actually not that complicated, because there isn't really a wrong answer. There's just sort of a more correct one, and that is because these aquariums and ecosystems like to emulate the most natural processes possible. In nature, we would have leaves naturally fall from the canopy onto the aquatic environments. Those would begin to degrade, and then more leaves would fall on top, forming a perpetual, ever-evolving layer of leaves, forming vast leaf litter beds in the water, and they're just going to degrade naturally. And maybe some of that detritus is going to get washed away when a rainy season comes along and the water flow picks up in those streams, so some of that detritus will naturally get swept away. But in the aquarium, we don't really have as much water volume or some of those seasonal patterns other than in a water change. So you can leave the leaves to fully break down, and this is the method that I've been following for the last 5 years, and I have noticed that it helps to stabilize the aquarium because all that detritus creates a lot more surface area for beneficial bacteria to colonize within the aquarium. So the way that I like to do it is to just leave the leaves be, and I like to layer more leaves on top of the old leaves, forming this natural perpetual substrate. However, that's not necessarily the look for everyone, which I totally get and totally respect. As the leaves degrade, they're going to leave behind a really beautiful leaf skeleton. And when it gets to a point that it's kind of unsightly for you, because maybe this is in your living room and it's it's more like of an art statement piece like an aquascape than it would be a botanical method aquarium, you can go ahead and remove those degraded leaves. You're just not going to get all of the potential benefits out of that leaf that are available to the fish and the ecosystem that you've put them into. So leave the leaves be, remove them once they're a leaf skeleton. There's really no wrong answer, but the thing I've been doing for the last 5 years is leaving the leaves alone, layering more on top. And when it comes to doing my weekly water changes of about 20% ish, I try not to siphon out more than a 3x3 inch section of detritus. This is in a 75 gallons, so that's what I follow. In a smaller aquarium, it might be an inch by inch, square inch of detritus, because that detritus is a food source for other organisms in the aquarium that are feeding the microscopic microfauna, the macrofauna, which then become the supplemental nutrition that your fish are snacking on in between your regular fish feedings. So you can remove some of the detritus, but don't remove too much or too frequently. The next question that I am frequently asked is, Ben, you own a company called Betta Botanicals. Can I use these products in an aquarium that don't contain betta fish or betta fish? And the answer is absolutely yes. I do have a large selection of products from Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, where betta fish are naturally from. However, I do have an entire product line from Colombia and Peru. So you can use these with your cardinal tetras, your neon tetras, your plecos, corydoras. All of the leaves that we use on the base of the aquarium to form their more natural habitat can also be used in the vivarium environment, and I have a number of videos on the channel of my dart frog builds. The same cashew leaf that I added into this South American biotope inspired aquarium, which it gets further from South American the longer I have it, because I'm like, oh, this crypt from Sri Lanka looks really good. Let's just add it into this tank, even though they're on opposite sides of the planet. That same cashew leaf for the South American aquarium can be used inside the dart frog enclosure to create a natural habitat for the dart frogs to feed the microfauna and the springtails just the same. So all of my products, while yes, come from a company called Betta Botanicals, they can be used with all fish. And for the biotope, serious biotoper, I have a lot of geographic specific botanicals. For example, giant Sapachia pod inside my South American aquarium. You could totally take that same Sapachia king pod and put it inside of a Betta aquarium. Your fish will not understand that it's come from the other side of the globe. It's still going to release those beneficial compounds to the water to help recreate a more natural environment for your companions. The last question that I want to cover today that I am being frequently asked is, how do I incorporate live aquatic plants into an environment with a high level of tannin content? And let's back up for a second, because in normal or standard mainstream planted aquariums, we think of Dutch style aquascapes or iwagumis, etc. And those all have very clear, crystal clear water. However, there's an entire subset of plants that are less demanding that you could totally grow, that I'm growing most of, in a tinted aquarium. There are a couple caveats. The first caveat is that when you use planted aquarium aqua soils from any brand, they have a very high cation exchange capacity because they are binding to elements in the water column, so they become available to your plant's roots. Well, it turns out that the tannins that you might be adding from Betta tea or naturally being released by the driftwood or manzanita wood or the botanicals themselves also naturally will bind to that aquatic aqua soil because of the high cation exchange capacity. So people will say to me, hey, I used fluval stratum and I can't keep tint in the aquarium for more than 48 hours. And unfortunately, it's because of that aqua soil. So I like to go with more natural sands, mixes of pebbles. I am blending up a botanical biotope and Blackwater specific sedimented substrate to be released to help preserve the tint and have more blends of clays and sands that you would find in a more natural substrate. So keeping that in mind, I like to elect for those more sandy, pebbly substrates that don't contain a lot of nutrients, but then supplement with root tabs. So for the cryptocorynes that I have down here, which are undulata, Crypt Tropica, and I think I have a Crypt Spiralis as well. I will just put a root tab underneath each of those so that I can preserve the tint that is being released into the water column by the Botanicals. The next thing is the tint. Plants photosynthesize. That's why we invest in such high-tech aquarium lighting with LEDs and color spectrums that you can change. If you are heavily tinting the aquarium, you're going to reduce the plant's ability to photosynthesize, which is going to reduce its growth rate, which might make it more prone to being colonized by algae. So for the planted botanical method aquarium, I like to go with low to medium demanding plants, and then also keep a low to medium amount of tint in the water. That's not to say that for a period of time I might increase those tannins to help block out more light to combat a little bit of algae growth or to mimic more of those natural seasonal patterns. But for the most part, I like to go with a low level of tannin content in the water. This is pretty close to what I would naturally have. We're getting really good light penetration down to these crypts at the bottom so that those plants can photosynthesize nice and happily. The next thing about having a planted botanical method aquarium is that plants themselves increase the surface area in the aquarium, which is great because it improves the amount of beneficial bacteria that we have managing the nitrogen cycle of the aquarium. However, a lot of those beneficial bacteria also consume tannins. So you might find that in the use of plants in your planted botanical method aquarium, you're gonna go through the tint and the tannins in the water column quicker than an aquarium that has less plants. There's also a couple studies out there that show that tannins can naturally be absorbed into plant roots, which doesn't really impact rooted plants like these crypts in the substrate, but I have some floating aquatic bamboo with a lot of these roots suspended in the water column. Those are gonna also absorb a small amount of tannins out of the water. So a lot of the things that come up in the planted botanical method aquarium is literally just the management of tannins in the water and how it's balancing and impacting the growth of the plants in the water. I have not done this. I plan to experiment with it, but it is the use of CO2 in the planted botanical method aquarium, because a lot of those aquascapes we see are running lots of CO2, higher light. They're dosing a lot of fertilizers into the water column, and so adding CO2 to a system like this is basically going to be pushing the gas pedal down on the plant growth, speeding it up. It's going to increase the biological processes happening around the plants, the tannin absorptions, the nutrients being absorbed out of the water column. I add a very small amount of plant fertilizer into the water column, way less, like 20% of what you would normally do in a clear water setup. And this is Nylock G by Thrive, and it's the shrimp specific all-in-one fertilizer. So I've been adding this in, and I have noticed that there's been a big improvement in the plant growth, especially in the floating plants, because floating plants have the aerial advantage. They have unlimited access to atmospheric CO2. You don't want to overdo the use of water column fertilizers though in the planted botanical method aquarium, because that tint is going to reduce the plant's photosynthesis rate, which might make those nutrients more available for algae to step in and absorb them out of the water column. So can you do a planted botanical method aquarium? Absolutely. Pick easy to grow plants that don't require high light, that can tolerate tannins and keep the tannin content in the water in the low to medium spectrum. A good way to judge that is, can you look from the top of the aquarium to the bottom and see the substrate at the bottom? That's how you know that the planted aquarium lights you invested in are having enough light reach the substrate for your crypts to be growing. So those are the most popular questions that I got asked in the last week on the management of botanical method, biotope, and Blackwater aquariums. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any questions, and I will answer them, probably direct you to some blog resources that I have on the website, because I have a lot of things that break down further the removal of old leaves in the aquarium, the management of tint in the aquarium for the plants, and many other concepts related to the botanical method, Blackwater, biotope aquarium. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like button. Please make sure that you share this video also with your fellow Tannin bays who are just getting into botanicals. I massively appreciate the support that you have shown my brand, especially as I've taken it full time. I'm coming up on 1 year of running this business full time, which just blows my mind because it's just gone by in the blink of an eye. But I'm having so much fun. I'm excited to make more of these more in-depth Q&A videos here on the Betta Botanicals YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next video.